Aloha nui kako, and welcome to our Imana I Wai DHHL Water Law and Advocacy trainings. Mahalo nui for joining us today. My name is Sabrina Maka Gramberg, and I'm a post-JD fellow with Kahuliao, and I will be your facilitator for this session. Before we get started, we'd like to get a sense of everyone who is logged on with us. Normally, if we were meeting in person, we would capture this information via a sign-in sheet, but please take a moment to locate the chat box. It's the icon near the middle bottom of your Zoom screen. And once you've located the chat box, please share with us your name and or your ohana name, whether you are a DHHL beneficiary or lessee, where you are Zooming from, and what you hope to get out of this training. And as folks populate the chat and trickle in, I'll play another song for us to enjoy as we wait to get started. Mahalo and aloha. Aloha again. For those just joining us today, please type in the chat box your name and or your ohana name, whether you are a DHHL beneficiary or lessee, where you are Zooming from, and what you hope to get out of this training. And we'll get started in just a moment. Mahalo and aloha. Okay, mahalo nui for providing us your sign-in information. Again, for those of you just logging on, please feel free to continue to populate the chat. I'd also like to let folks know that we will be recording this session. And if I can actually have U'ilani, if you can please help us press record. Thank you so much. Now I'll quickly take us through our roadmap for today's session. I'll start us off with an introduction to Kahuliao and the Imana Ikavai trainings. Then Dr. Jonathan Lee Keke Shuyer will take us into a deep dive of DHHL's water policy. Following Dr. Shuyer's presentation, Kaululu'uvai will take us through the legislative process and detail for us how bills become law and the process by which you can get involved and give your leo to these very important measures. After Kaulu's presentation, we'll take a short 5-minute break so folks can stand up and stretch for a moment. When we return, Hi'ile Casco will set a foundation for us on 3 of the bills the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is introducing this season. Importantly, Hi'ile will walk us through the mechanics and goals of each measure. Following Hi'ile's presentation, I will share some mana'o in submitting written testimony. And then we'll close with an open, super conversational kama'ilio question and answer discussion, at which point we welcome your questions on the mana'o that's been presented. Again, I'd like to start us off with an introduction to Kahuliao and provide some history and context about our Imana Ikavai DHHL Water Law and Advocacy trainings. Kahuliao is an academic center that promotes education, scholarship, community outreach, and collaboration on issues of law, culture, and justice for Native Hawaiians and other Pacific and Indigenous peoples. As an academic center, we have a number of roles at the university and throughout Hawai'i. And just to name a few, we educate everyone from law students to community members to government officials in various aspects of Native Hawaiian culture and law. We produce scholarships such as our Native Hawaiian law treatise. Kahuliao also provides direct legal services to communities in need through our Native Hawaiian and environmental law clinics. And in May 2020, we graduated our 130th Juris Doctor with a specialization in Native Hawaiian law. Our inoa, our name, Kahuliao, means turning toward the light. And it embodies our educational philosophy, which is to take the very best of Native Hawaiian culture and tradition in pursuit of scholarship, enlightenment, and justice. Our name is not only rooted in enlightenment, but also this idea of huli, or change, and being instruments of change through the law. Both concepts, light and change, are reflected in our logo, which depicts the huli of a kalo with its first leaf unfurling and turning toward the light. Our name is also a core part of an olelo no'eau, or Hawaiian proverb, that is a theme for today's training. E hahai pono I ke ala kukui me Kahuliao, which translates as pursue the path of enlightenment through justice. And for Kahuliao, this really embodies our approach to Native Hawaiian culture and law. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge and introduce our team. With us today, from Kahuliao, we have our director, our leader, Kapua Sprout. We have our team of post-JD fellows, Mahina Tudor, Ku'upua Kiuna, and U'ilani Tanigawa alum. And joining our meeting today from DHHL, we have Andrew Choi, the Acting Planning Program Manager at DHHL, and Lehua Kinilau Kano, the Legislative Analyst for the department. And I'd like to thank each one of them for their many contributions and kokua to this training. We are in a very special year of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act's existence, and we wanted to take a moment to shine some light on the vision and leadership of Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalaniana Ole, a kupa of Kauai, and the driving force behind the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. His example of aloha for his people embodies the kuleana of our ali'i and mo'i to look after their people and ensure their needs are cared for. A year before Congress would vote on and pass the Rehabilitation Bill, which we now know as the HHCA, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, Kuhio spoke to members of the Hawaiian Civic Club, a Native Hawaiian organization. He introduced to them various clauses of the bill and also voiced his mana'o not only on the importance of the measure, but also the importance of unifying our people and being proud to be Kanaka. He said, quote, "You will never succeed unless you hustle. Now you have your chance and it is all up to you. You are nobody unless you are proud of your race. And he added, it is a pity we are all setting aside much that is worthy in our customs and traditions. There is much that the Hawaiian people can teach Americans, and it has been said that Hawaiians never stand together, and too often it has been true. Let us prove to the world now that this statement is not always true. Kuhio's words in 1920 are still relevant today, and it is through our hard work and our efforts that we will create the Huli and the changes throughout our Pai'aina and government systems. For those interested, I've included the newspaper article where that quote came from in your training materials, along with a link to view the entire newspaper page from that day. So as we celebrate and take stock of the past 100 years of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, I hope that we take an honest look at the progress, but also at the challenges that we, our kupuna, and the department have experienced. I hope the reflection of that provides us with the motivation and commitment to want and demand more from our elected officials so that in the next 100 years, our pua, our generations will have more. As we get into the substance of our Imana Ikawai trainings, we acknowledge that DHHL has a very robust legislative package this 2021 session, which includes the casino bill that you've likely heard about. Nevertheless, this training is really focused on water and orienting folks to the new procedures that you'll encounter at the Ledge due to the ongoing global pandemic. Since its creation, the goal of our Imana Ikawai DHHL Water Law and Advocacy training is to provide a brief overview of Hawaii's legal framework governing water resource management, and to discuss specific ways homestead communities can advocate for the pono use and protection of wai. Hale Aloha Ayel, the water resource manager at DHHL at the time, came up with the name for our trainings. He shared, "He kuleana koka ko e malama I mana ikawai." So the responsibility is ours to care for and nurture so that we are empowered by our freshwater resources. Importantly, the underlying purpose of previous trainings was to build a community of practice or a hui of advocates, water warriors who would be grounded in Hawaii water law to share with other beneficiaries and advocate for their interests in front of the legislature and state and county agencies. Past trainings were place-based, like the one pictured here, which took place in Anahola, Kauai in August of 2018. There, Kahulia examined bubbling issues specific to each homestead community together with community leaders. Due to COVID-19 and because of very important issues at the Ledge, which will affect all beneficiaries in today's training, we are shifting gears a bit and focusing on some of the measures DHHL will be proposing in the 2021 session and how we can better uphold and assert homesteaders' kuleana through that process. And specifically, how can we uphold and assert our unique water rights and responsibilities under the law? In addition to Imana Ikawai, our hope for today's training and really throughout this legislative session include Imana Ikaike, that we are empowered through knowledge, and first our ancestral knowledge that we always carry it with us in these spaces to support and direct us to what's pono. Second, that we always continue to be maka'ala and grow our awareness and our understanding of the government decisions that are being made that directly impact our communities. Imana ika laulima. Laulima, or many hands, speaks of cooperation, that we empower one another and also keep in mind that our movements to protect, to revitalize, and cultivate have a better chance of success if we put our many hands together as a community to malama and care for one another and our resources. And then lastly, Imana Ike Aloha, that we never forget the power in aloha, and that we remember that aloha is a renewable resource and it increases the more we give. Before I pass the mic over to Dr. Schroyer, I wanted to touch on some housekeeping items. Your training materials were uploaded to the Google Drive, and hopefully you've had a chance to look them over. I also wanted to go over some Zoom best practices that we like to put in place. First is please remain on mute. If you'd like to share mana'o, or if you have a question, we will open that opportunity up to you in the Q&A portion at the end of all of our presentations. And if you are experiencing any technical issues, please email nhlawctr@hawaii.edu. Another Zoom tip that we've learned, if you are experiencing spotty Wi-Fi or internet, one thing that helps is to stop video, and that usually restores the sound in your viewing experience. Finally, if you experience any other issues during the training, please chat directly ka Huli for assistance, and our legal fellow, Ku'upua, will be on the other end and will do her best to assist you. So e holomua kako, let's continue. Our next presentation today focuses on DHHL's water policy. And at this time, I'll invite Dr. Scheuer to get set up. While he's doing that, I'd like to take a moment to introduce him. Born and raised on Oahu, Dr. Jonathan Likeke Scheuer works in environmental conflicts, seeking solutions that create shared, sustainable prosperity for the communities and resources involved. He is a lecturer in the William S. Richardson School of Law and is a co-author of the book Water and Power in West Maui. As a volunteer, he serves as the chair of the Hawaii State Land Use Commission and on the board of the Hawaiian Islands Land Trust. And previously, he served as a Konamoku representative on the Oahu Island Burial Council. Please join me in welcoming him.
Aloha, everyone. Sorry, suddenly I was like 3 screens and I couldn't find the mute button. Here we are in month 10 of Zooming, right? Or month 11. Still learning, but aloha, everyone. We are in month 11 of this pandemic, and I know in so many ways we wish we were all together in the same room, seeing old friends. But one of the silver linings, which makes me happy, is like we have people on the call today. I saw in the chat from Texas, we have people from San Diego, we have folks from Kaupo and Molokai and Kauai and Hawaii Island, and it just makes me very happy that while we're geographically apart, we're able to connect on our passion for our communities and our passion for water. So I will be very brief, and I will just try and walk you through a little bit of the context of why are we having this training and why is the department proposing these particular bills. It comes out of something called the Water Policy Plan that the Hawaiian Homes Commission adopted in 2014. I'll just talk about 4 things. DHHL has a planning system. It essentially acts like a zoning body for all of the 200,000 acres it holds in trust. The Hawaiian Homes Commission does. And so the Water Policy Plan is part of that planning system and zoning system. I will talk about that. I will then talk about how the Water Policy Plan was developed, what the content is, and then some of the progress we've made since 2014 in implementing it. Really briefly, DHHL, the Hawaiian Homes Commission, like I said, in this regard, acts as a planning body. They look at all 200,000 acres of their lands across the islands, and actually only after really extensive beneficiary consultation, they say, okay, in this particular area, which lands do we want to be made available for agricultural homesteading, for residential homesteading, for community uses, perhaps for commercial uses, and then those lands, those categories are designated in the general plan. And then in island plans and eventually in regional plans, those specific land uses are put into place. But there's also an acknowledgement in the DHHL planning system that there's some topics that go across the Pai'aina. And those include things like renewable energy and include things like water. So the Water Policy Plan is really the Hawaiian Homes Commission's direction to the department and to itself. How do we consistently and reliably make decisions about VI that are in the best interests of the trust and the beneficiaries? Now, the department didn't always have a water policy plan. And in fact, this plan is, to our knowledge, the first time since the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act was passed in 1921 by Congress that there was a policy that guided how water decisions were made. Other water decisions appeared to have been made on a sort of case-by-case basis. Oh, we need water in this community. How do we go get it? There's this water policy issue coming up. How do we deal with it? But not in a sort of consistent and methodical manner. So it really came across as a part of a it came as the result of a 2-year process of consultation by the commission and department staff with beneficiaries and experts across Hawaii. We started out with leader consultation, both beneficiary community leaders as well as leaders in thinking about VAI around the islands. Folks like, I'm pretty sure I remember we talked with, who's on the call today, Uncle Glenn Tevis, about issues. We talked with Kapua Sprout before we started down this path and said, okay, what are the things that we need to be thinking about? We gathered together the files, which were scattered not just within DHHL, but in other state departments about DHHL's water assets and rights. We did policy analysis of parts of the law that had never been implemented to protect DHHL's water rights and the beneficiaries' water rights. We thought about how DHHL interacts with VAI, and we really thought about our kuleana in terms of 3 main categories of things. And we understood we are a water purveyor. We own and operate 4 water management systems. We also plan for the future use of water, but we also advocate for the use of water and the rights of our beneficiaries. And so those 3 kuleana are how we pursue our water policy. When we had done our initial research, we did a round of 10 beneficiary consultations across the islands pre-pandemic, so it was able to be in person. And we listened to the different specific concerns that each community had, as well as concerns that sort of echoed across our communities and across the islands. We gathered those together. We came up with a draft plan, and from beneficiaries' voices, we had a list of 23 potential goals to implement in the plan. We took a draft together. We put it to the Hawaiian Homes Commission. They approved it only as a draft, and they said, now go do another 10 meetings all across the archipelago and hear what people have to say. So we did another 10 rounds with a draft plan, got people's input, including what they ranked as the most important goals for the policy, brought that to the Hawaiian Homes Commission, and that was adopted on July 22nd, 2014. I think Sabrina or somebody else will put into a chat. You can see all of this online, the link to the actual policy plan itself. It's fairly simply organized. There's 6 sections to it. The vision statement is directly from the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, Section 101. We didn't invent anything new. The mission statement is a simple statement of how we're going to try and fulfill our kuleana around water, both managing water systems, advocating for our rights, as well as protecting our water resources. Then we have a statement, which I'll go into in slightly more detail, of values, policies, and goals. And then we do an annual implementation program. The values, and these were one of the things that came across in all our discussions around VAI, around Hawaii, in our beneficiary communities and with experts. 4 values stood out to us. One was the understanding that VAI is really the source of wealth for our communities and the source of life for our communities. In so many places, VAI has been taken away, and that the restoration of VAI is really the restoration of VAI to our communities. The idea of Vaihona, or a repository of knowledge, that the department, having been in some ways land-focused rather than VAI-focused for many years, had not purposefully gathered together its practical and cultural knowledge on water as a basis for its decision-making. The idea of Malama, that as a Hawaiian institution, not just a state agency, that our relationship with VAI is familial and that we have a duty of care to it. And then the idea of Laulima was also the 4th value that came across, and was really that as much as we'd like to fully control our own destiny all by ourselves, VAI ignores property boundaries. It flows off our lands, it flows onto our lands. It requires us to work with others. It requires us to work across agencies, across jurisdictions, across land ownerships in order to bring life to our communities. And so those 4 values are supposed to inform all of our actions. As I mentioned, there were 23 goals that people had listed as saying, hey, this is really important to us. And then we ranked goals across. We asked beneficiaries to rank all these goals, and 4 goals came out as the priority goals that were then endorsed by the Hawaiian Homes Commission for the first years of implementation of the policy. The first one has to do with communication, affirmatively and aggressively communicating with beneficiaries before and after decisions are made around VAI. The second, and this is probably where the most attention has been paid since the adoption of the policy, to aggressively, proactively, consistently, and comprehensively advocate for the kuleana of the beneficiaries, the department, and the commission to water before all agencies and entities. DHHL had been not fully consistent about advocating for its rights over many years in front of the Water Commission, in front of the county boards of water supply, and we've tried to step that game up. The third was to create a WAI, water assets inventory, to really collect thoughtfully together the knowledge of our water assets, whether they be wells or pipelines, or whether they be our wind and rain names that inform us of how we should interact with WAI on our INA. And finally, and this was directly from beneficiary input, they want the department to be an active participant in watershed protection. And really the idea was, as an entity that leases land for 99 years, renewable for 99 years, we don't just want water in the pipe right now, though we certainly need that. We want water for our great-great-grandchildren to be there. And so those were the 4 goals that came across. Something that was added by the Hawaiian Homes Commission, and I'm really glad they did, was that they said, you know what, every year in May, come to us and do 2 things. Report on what you've done over the past year, on whether or not you've reached your goals, and tell us how you're going to implement this plan in the next year. And so every May, and this is all publicly available and you can testify on it and review on it, how do we intend to reach these 4 goals and the other subsidiary goals over the course of the next year? And we report, and sometimes we make our goals, all of them, sometimes we make some of them, sometimes things come up, but we try to be transparent about that and do that as part of our commitment to reporting. So what's happened in the time that we've been together? We've made some good progress. These presentations, the second round of partnership with Kahuliao, and I think the 4th round of beneficiary training under the water policy plan is one thing that we've emphasized with the real deep knowledge from the development of the plan that we're only going to succeed, not just the department, not just the beneficiaries, but shoulder to shoulder together, advocating for the rights of we have towards WAI. We've, as I mentioned, increased our advocacy at the state and county level before the Water Commission and the boards of water supply, and even into the Hawaii Supreme Court. Working with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, we did our first full estimate of all the future water needs of DHHL lands, all 200,000 acres. And then we've asked the Water Commission to translate those into reservations, essentially to kapu some water for us across the islands. We're not done with that process, but we now do have groundwater reservations all across Hawaii for our future lands. Those waters are not to be available for other developers, but set aside for DHHL. We've now been working, even as we pursue more reservations, on different legal processes to try and go from reservations, which are really just numbers on a sheet of paper that say this is how much is set aside for you, to actually getting wet water into our communities. And we've succeeded in that in various ways. One of those is in Waimea, Kauai. Behind me, my screen image is of a reservoir, Pu'opai Reservoir. It's part of a 16,000 acre tract of land on the west side of Kauai that was part of the original set aside from Congress to the Hawaiian Homes Commission, but has never been successfully settled, significantly due to lack of WAI. And now we have a 7 million gallon a day reservation of surface water from the Koke'e irrigation system, and we're in the process of partnering with KIUC to both put in the infrastructure, develop hydropower, and develop irrigation so that those lands will be usable and accessible. We've also started and made major progress on the cultural assets inventory component of the WAI. I know this is a lot of information and there's a lot more to come, so I will be pau there. I'm happy to answer questions in the chat or during the talk story afterwards. But again, this is sort of why are we pursuing these things, this legislation and these concerns. It's informed by this commitment that really the beneficiaries told the Hawaiian Homes Commission to go be consistent about WAI and adopt this policy. Mahalo.
Okay, awesome. Mahalo, Jonathan. Please join me in a virtual round of applause for that. Thank you so much for that really important history and context and for taking us through DHHL's water policy. As we move forward in our program, I'd like to introduce our next presenter and let her get set up with her PowerPoint. Kaulu Pono Okalele Hua Lu'uwai was born and raised on the island of Maui and grew up in the Huli homestead. Her ohana comes from Makena in Kipahulu on Maui. She's a research assistant for Kahuliao and is in her last semester of law school. She intends to graduate with certificates in Native Hawaiian and environmental law. Please join in welcoming Kaulu.
Aloha, everyone. Aloha and welcome to our Imanai Kauai Water Law Advocacy training again. As you heard, my name is Kaulu Lu'uai. I am in my last year of law school, and I was raised on the Waiahuli homestead where my ohana still lives. So it's really an honor to be presenting to you all today. And this portion of the presentation aims to provide you with some background on the legislature and the legislative process to increase beneficiary knowledge and hopefully to inspire all of you folks to engage and advocate on behalf of your own interests. So over the years, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and its planning office in particular have worked really hard to build interest and knowledge about the importance of water resources to the development and longevity of the Hawaiian homelands and the department's mission. So the department has a similar presentation on the legislative process that has other information like how the legislature directly impacts the department, such as through the budget process. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to be focusing on an overview of the legislative process with information particularly related to water bills that the Hawaiian Homes Commission approved in its legislative package in the fall. And the DHHL Planning Office has also invested a great effort to ensure that beneficiaries and their ohana understand the constitutional and legal provisions that ensure and protect our water rights and the priorities for the department, which brings us here today. So as a Department of Hawaiian Homelands beneficiaries perhaps, and as ohana and part of this community, you play a vital role in shaping our future. So we're so excited that you joined us to educate yourself. And today we'll have a quick roadmap for you, and we'll be discussing an overview of the legislative process, and I'll also focus on how things have changed at the legislature in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we'll also review some basic features of the Hawaii Legislature website, and then the next presentation will share specifics about bills from the Hawaiian Homeland Commission's package to the legislature. So to start, the Hawaii State Legislature, as you may know, has the main power of creating laws. And this power is derived from our Hawaii Constitution. And this is our state's guiding document that was drafted and ratified by Hawaii citizens like you. So there are two other branches of the government, which include the executive branch, who is ran by the governor, and below him are state agencies. And this other branch is the judicial branch, which consists of Hawaii courts and judges who interpret our constitutional provisions, as well as laws made by the legislature or rules created by executive agencies. It is also important to note that the legislature, or the ledge, as you might hear us refer to it, is a check on the executive and judicial branches of government and vice versa. So those branches also serve as a check on the legislature. And the ledge is comprised of a multi-member body of popularly elected officials, which has two parts. The first is the Senate, and then the second is the House of Representatives. And this is similar to Congress's structure at the federal level. And together they make up the legislature. And given the goal of this presentation is to share information with beneficiaries, DHHL beneficiaries on the legislative process and ways to effectively engage in lawmaking, I would not be doing my job if I didn't encourage all of you to engage with your senators and representatives, because they are responsible for ensuring your voices as their constituents are heard. So instructions on how to find contact information for your representative or senator are located in Handout 1, and that handout is titled Hawaii Legislature Website Guide, and specifically on page 2, and that's located in the Google Drive, as you might see in the chat. And if you're having issues looking for the handouts in the Google Drive, just let us know and we'll get that link to you to access all of the handouts and information. So just to humanize our policymakers, I wanted to show you folks who my representatives are. So on the left, you have Senator English, and on the right, we have Representative Kyle Yamashita, and I've engaged with them both through email and calling their offices, and I got this information from the Hawaii website, Hawaii Legislative website, which you see here. This is the front page of the handout, just so that you know if you're looking through what to look for. And now we'll look over some of the key functions of our state senators and representatives, which are also called legislators. And their key functions include modifying existing laws and making new laws. And they develop the state budget as it's received from the governor. And in particular, the budget is a major focus this year because of the climate we're in with the pandemic. Another thing they do, an important function, is that they confirm executive appointments. For example, the Department of Hawaiian Homeland's Director, William Ayla, was confirmed by the legislators. And under Article 3, Section 10 of our Hawaii Constitution, the legislature convenes on the third Wednesday of January of each year. So although we're in the midst of a pandemic, this requirement remains. And this year, the legislature convened on January 20th, which was 2 days ago. You might have seen it on the news. And I wanted to point out that although our legislators will continue to make laws, the state capitol building remains closed due to the pandemic. Nevertheless, the decision-making will continue, so it's even more important to educate ourselves on how we can engage and the tools we can use given we are constrained in certain ways because of the pandemic. So as I just mentioned, the Capitol building is closed, and unfortunately, this is not the only change that has happened. Typically at the start of the legislative session, there's a big opening at the Capitol. It's a big celebration with lots of people attending. But as you may have seen on the news, the Capitol is barricaded now, and the legislature opening was very, very small. And as the session progresses, many people also go through the Capitol to engage with the legislature by going to offices of individual members to discuss issues or meeting with caucuses, which are groups of legislators that share a common goal. So for example, at the legislature, there is a Native Hawaiian caucus made up of lawmakers who are concerned with Native Hawaiian issues. And another way individuals interact with the legislature is through testifying in person on bills that impact them. And this has all changed because of the pandemic. And recently, the Senate released steps it has taken to make sure that its staff and the public are safe during this time. And so one of the major changes is that the Senate will be conducting all of their business virtually. And this includes committee hearings, which are usually open to the public and where the public has an opportunity to provide live testimony to that committee that's reviewing a bill. So for the 2021 legislative session, because hearings will be held virtually, so will live testimony. And some of the important changes I want you folks to be aware of are that the Senate will be using Zoom to conduct hearings, and testifiers will be given the option to submit remote virtual testimony once they've submitted their written testimony. And individuals must register no later than 24 hours prior to the committee hearing in order to be able to testify remotely. And lastly, all of the standing committee hearings will be live streamed on YouTube. So the image here on this slide, you'll see that's just a picture of what the Hawaii Senate YouTube page looks like. And I've provided the link here on the slide. And the State House, on the other hand, has gone as far as creating specific guidelines on remote hearing testimony. And this includes how to operate Zoom and the 24-hour deadline for submitting written testimony and the request to testify and other instructions for you. And that guideline document is included in Handout 2 in the Google Drive. And here is Handout 2, just if you're scrolling through. Another important thing to know, as I mentioned earlier, is the budget, especially because of the budget cuts we are anticipating and austerity measures. This might impact the DHHL and specific measures that require funding. So another important change this year is the calendar for the legislative session, because the calendar dictates how long the legislature has to pass a particular bill. And the legislature recently published its calendar, which has scheduled this session to be only 1 week shorter than it normally has been in past years. And this is actually a positive sign because it means that even though we're in this time, the legislature is still committed to conducting their business as usual, and it only has shortened the process by a little bit. And the timetable is located in Handout 3 in the Google Drive, and this is just an image of it here. And now we'll look at the formal process. And the diagram on this slide just is an illustration of the complicated process of what a bill needs to go through to become a law. So you'll see all the arrows, and so just so you know, I'm not going to go over all of it because it's really, really confusing and can take a long time to understand. But what I want you folks all to take away from in this presentation are the resources available so you can learn the process at your own pace. But essentially, for a bill to become a law, it's very difficult. But this long process is meant to ensure that adequate public input and legislatures have enough time to vet the weaknesses or advantages of a particular bill before it becomes law. And on this topic, because of the stringent process, most bills die, is what we refer to it, or they don't actually become law. So for example, in 2020, more than 5,000 bills were heard by the legislature, but only 75 actually became law. And these statistics are a little bit more drastic because the pandemic interrupted the legislative session. But another example is in 2019, over 3,100 bills were introduced, but only 286 actually became law. And the Legislative Reference Bureau, or LRB, has a great website on how a bill becomes a law and explains this process in a very detailed way. And Handout 4 contains a larger image of what is shown on the slide. And I also have a handout for you folks on the detailed written process. So Handout 5 has that explanation for you folks, and Handout 5 also includes a URL so you can go directly to the Legislative Reference Bureau website to get more information. And if you prefer to talk to an expert in person, the Public Access Room has a coffee hour held on Fridays at 3 p.m. And I've included the Zoom information on this slide, but if you go to the LRB website as provided in Handout 5, you'll also be able to access that Zoom information. And according to the Public Access Room, their staff will be available to talk story, answer questions, and discuss the process with anybody who tunes in. So here's just an image of Handout 5, and as you see on the top here, there's a URL for you to go direct, that will take you directly to the website. And now that we've talked about a little bit of the formal process, I want to get into a little bit of the informal process on how to achieve a policy at the legislature. And unfortunately, these methods haven't always been used to the advantage of OEV or the Native Hawaiian community. And that's why it's important for OEV to engage in the lawmaking process and build capacity so we can achieve policies that benefit us. And to start, personal relationships, as you folks probably know, are super important, and they can come in many forms at the legislature. So these may be relationships between individuals representing a certain interest who have a personal relationship with a lawmaker, or even relationships between specific lawmakers, and relationships between a senator or a representative and someone in another branch of government. For example, if a senator has a relationship with someone in the governor's office. And same in our community where connections matter, it's also very key in how bills get passed. And the next two bullets I'll go over, they go hand in hand, but I feel it's important for us to call them out and explain them individually. So while strong engagement can be in the form of getting support from on a particular issue and then using that support to pressure lawmakers, it can also be in the form of individuals calling or emailing their representatives and senators to ask questions, give suggestions, or simply comment on existing or proposed laws. And strong engagement may even take the form of a familiar term you might have heard called lobbying. And this is when a person, typically paid to represent a particular side of an issue, takes part in an organized attempt to influence legislators. And while lobbyists sometimes represent public interests, they more often than not actually work for private companies or corporations who have this financial resource or financial resources to support this kind of engagement. And last, engagement may take the form of submitting written testimony as well as appearing before a committee to testify live on an issue, which Sabrina will go over later in the presentation. And public support and in turn public support and in turn pressure on our lawmakers is also a significant factor in the lawmaking process. It's important for us all to remember that lawmakers are elected by us, and therefore they work for us in that way. And if they feel pressured by their constituents who are putting pressure on them and watching their moves and their decisions, they will find a way to change paths so that they can, be reelected and keep their job security, or even they don't want to risk embarrassment. So unfortunately, lawmakers have not always felt the need to listen to the Native Hawaiian community in this way, even when large public outcries are made. For example, the East Maui water diversions, and this may be attributed to the fact that OEV have a low voter turnout when elections come around, and also just in general because we're a minority in our homelands. And other aspects of the informal process that I want to bring up are political and economic factors, and especially during this time of political strife or economic austerity, which we are currently experiencing. These may be less in control of individuals, but that makes it even more important for us as citizens to engage in all the forms I just mentioned, where our voices can be heard. And now that we've gone through the process, we want to dive a little deeper into features that are within our Hawaii Legislature website, which is an award-winning website because of its a usability for the public, and it's also a clearinghouse for public information. And this website will keep you updated on what's going on at the legislature, and it has instructions and detailed instructions on how to use the different features of the website. So for example, anyone can sign up for regular updates so you never miss a bill's movement. And once you have an account, you can also easily submit testimony to any bill. Another great feature are hearing notifications, which let you know when a Senate or a House committee is hearing a bill and the deadline to submit your testimony. And Handout 1 has this detailed guide on how to navigate the website and its other unique features that you can use so that you can access all the information available for the public. Another feature I want to mention is the ability to search for bills of interest using the reports and lists page. And this is a detailed guide on how to do this is located in the Handout 1 on page 8. And to briefly explain how you do that, because it's such an important feature that I want you folks all to just have an idea. When you go to the Hawaii Legislature website and on their homepage, you'll look for this icon on the bottom when you scroll, and the icon is Reports and Lists. It's shown here under the second bullet point. And you'll click that icon and it'll take you to a page that looks similar to the one here on the left. And once you get to that website, in that page, you'll see the red arrow here is pointing to 2020. And there you can have a drop-down menu that will allow you to select a year for searching bills. And this starts in 2013 and on. And then once you pick your year, you'll go to the left column and scroll to the bottom, and you'll click subject search, and then there will appear a search box similar to the one shown here on the slide. And this search box allows you to search for particular keywords and subjects that are located in a measure's title or a bill's title, or that are located in the description of a bill. So for example, when I use the search term Hawaiian homes in the year 2020, I get 43 results, and these include legislative reports and bills that contain this term in either the title or the description and pertain to the Hawaiian Homes Commission, whose full name is the Hawaiian Homes Commission with an S after homes. And this will be important for my next point. So if I was interested in bills pertaining to the commission as well as the department, whose full name is the Department of Hawaiian Homelands without an S after home, I would use a key search term, Hawaiian home. And this will produce 79 results as compared to 43 when I use Hawaiian homes referring to the commission. And this tool is helpful for a few reasons. For one, within the first week of the legislative session, all bills that are introduced will be posted under this page that you'll be able to search. So by using this feature, you can find bills that you might be interested in using the different search terms. And then you can sign up for notifications on those bills to track them through the legislative session. And another reason this feature is really important is because some say a bill takes an average of 5 years to pass. And while this isn't always true, for most bills, they will have to be introduced multiple times before they gain traction and actually become law. So this feature allows you to trace the history of a particular bill from prior years and to see how has it evolved for better or for worse. And the last feature I want to show you folks is the glossary located on the legislature website page. And this glossary contains commonly used acronyms and words that are written into bills or are spoken by our lawmakers. So to access our glossary, you'll go all the way down to the bottom of the home page, and you'll look on the right of the home page for a block similar to this one. And then I've highlighted legislative glossary. So you'll click there and you'll see a bunch of different terms pop up that you can search in alphabetical order. So familiarizing yourself with the commonly used terms has many benefits, such as easing the process so we can quickly understand what a bill is actually saying, those type of things. Or when you hear someone speaking about the legislature, you can kind of get a better understanding. So this is handout 1 again, just for you folks to scroll through if you're looking in the Google Docs. And this is just a great resource because it does give you really great instructions on how to use the different features from the website. And I hope you learned something from this presentation. If you could just put one thing in the chat that you've learned, so we know you learned something. And if you have trouble accessing the handouts I've mentioned in this presentation, let us know and we can help you access those. And we'll be holding questions until the end of the entire presentation. But we have a poll here to get a temperature check on you all to see what you guys might have questions on. And so we can address those in the Q&A. And now we'll take a short break, after which my colleague Huli will give you a presentation on the different bills within the Hawaiian Homes Commission's approved legislative package. Mahalo, and I hope you enjoyed this part of the presentation.
Aloha again, and welcome everybody back from break. As people start to come back, and before we get into our next presentation, we'd like to take a quick poll for our records of all who is in the room. Again, we note that in the beginning, people were still signing on, so we'd like to get an updated count. So please give me a moment while I locate the poll. And then if I can have folks please respond to the poll, and then we'll go ahead and let our next presenter, Hi'ilei, get set up while folks do that. Thank you. Okay, and I'll give people just a few more seconds. Thank you so much for filling out the poll. Okay, well, mahalo for participating, and let us move now to our third presentation of the day, which will be given by Hi'ilei. Hi'ilei Casco was born and raised on Maui. She is in her first year at the William S. Richardson School of Law and a research assistant with Kahuliao. As a Kanaka Uiwi scholar, Hi'ilei seeks opportunities to engage in projects that center Indigenous knowledges, voices, and issues. She's pursuing a law degree to nurture her passion for upholding and improving legal protections for the livelihoods of Native communities, as well as their ability to understand and utilize legal resources in ways that they can embrace and be empowered by. Please join me in welcoming Hi'ilei. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Sabrina, and mahalo for, again, everyone joining us today. And if you've been here from the beginning, for sticking with us throughout our workshop. As Sabrina said, aloha, my name is Hi'ilei Casco. I'm in my first year of law school here at UH Manoa and a research assistant with Kahuliao. In this portion of our presentation, I'll be walking everyone through 3 key bills that were initially from DHHL's 2021 legislative package that were approved by the Hawaiian Homes Commission in the fall. These bills all relate to water resources. As we noted at the beginning of this session, that is our focus today. If you have questions about other aspects of DHHL's legislative package, those are best directed to Lehua Kinilau Kano. We've included her email in the chat box, and she's also here with us today, so you can direct message her in the chat if you have any questions related to that. Let's get started. As an overview, we'll first start with digests or background and other info for each of the 3 bills. In this part, I'll share some context surrounding each bill, its overall purpose and intent, and then cover language and terms to make sure we have a good understanding of what each bill was designed to achieve. I want to note at the outset that because the legislative session officially started on Wednesday of this week, not all bills have been introduced or numbered. So for today's training, we'll use the numbers DHHL assigned to them, which are HHL 8, 9, and 10. Please note that these numbers will change as the session progresses. The first bill we'll cover is HHL 8, relating to the county boards of water supply. As you all well know, securing access to water has been a key barrier for developing Hawaiian homes. Water is essential for supporting efforts towards self-sufficiency and self-determination, as well as for the preservation of our values, traditions, and culture. For example, in addition to its importance to agriculture and one's ability to live off the land, freshwater streams are also the inspiration for and foundation of numerous mele, legendary mo'olelo, hula, oli, all serving as key repositories for Hawaiian ways of life, philosophies, and worldviews. There are many challenges to ensuring that there are adequate and continuous supplies of water so that homestead lands will always be usable and accessible. For example, the State Commission on Water Resource Management established at least some additional ground and surface water reservations for Hawaiian homes projects on each island. Yet, some counties treat DHHL like any other developer without differentiating or prioritizing water for Hawaiian homes projects. Processes and requirements differ by county, but this has been a pervasive problem across our Pai'aina. As an example, let's turn toward the Pu'unani homestead in Waikapu, Maui. DHHL received land and financing from a private developer in Waikapu to develop homesteading in exchange for affordable housing tax credits. However, the County Department of Water Supply is not willing to provide available water off of its system to the Pu'unani development because DHHL does not fit into the county's definition of affordable housing. The county code does not recognize DHHL development as unique and different from other types of development. Thus, the county is giving DHHL an even harder time than a private developer because they do not fit neatly into the county's definition of affordable housing. So why is it problematic that counties treat DHHL like any other developer without differentiating or prioritizing water for Hawaiian homes projects? As many of you also know, our county boards and departments of water supply have a legal mandate to ensure Hawaiian homes projects receive this water. Specifically, Article 12, Section 2 of Hawaii's Constitution reaffirmed that the spirit of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, also known as the HHCA, shall be faithfully carried out, including the maintenance and expansion of Hawaiian homes projects throughout the state. Under the HHCA, water reservations should be made for any municipal water needs, livestock cultivation, and aqua and agricultural operations. Unfortunately, even with this express language, this has not happened. 100 years after the HHCA's passage, its full intent and purpose have yet to be realized for homestead communities. Developing water involves multiple moving parts. As you can see from this graph, water to your home is first extracted from the ground through a network of shafts, water tunnels, and wells located across your island, or diverted from streams and then treated to drinking water standards. Transmission systems and reservoirs convey and store water for home use. Getting water to homes is also extremely costly. Fully developing a single water source, which includes sourcing, storing, and transmitting, can cost anywhere from $11 to $15 million. While this graph is for Oahu's water systems, it also reflects water development across all of Hawaii. As we'll discuss more later, HHL 8 would apply to all counties across our Pai'aina. When a new water source, transmission, and storage are created on a water system, the relevant Department of Water Supply creates credits that can then be allocated to new developments. One water credit is the estimated amount of water needed for a single family home on a homestead lot. However, this varies from island to island. For example, one water credit for a single family home on Hawai'i Island is about 400 gallons per unit, while on Maui, it is around 600 gallons per unit. The water credit system can be a little confusing. To summarize, generally only about 2/3 of the capacity of a given water source, such as a well, is pumped per day. Within that 2/3, the county takes around 1/3 for its own use, such as for parks or housing developments. The other 1/3 is what is available for DHHL uses. Credits are then created based on how much water is left in this 1/3 portion. So if DHHL develops a 1.5 million gallon per day well, it would likely only have about 666,000 gallons per day for its homestead use, after the county reduces the capacity to 1 million gallon per day and then requests 1/3 of that for the county's own use. It is important to remember that DHHL is a public trust purpose, so it has priority over water resources. Because of this, DHHL shouldn't be treated differently in the way water is allocated to it. Instead of simply getting whatever portion remains after the county reserves water for its own needs, DHHL should instead be prioritized and given the full amount of water credits required and justified by a given water development. HHL 8 is one way to honor this special status. In response to these continuing challenges, this bill was drafted as a step towards implementing the HHCA's provisions by reaffirming and prioritizing our water for our homestead communities so that more people can get off of the wait list and into homes. For our purposes today, this bill has two key aspects. First, building Hawaiian homes is a legal responsibility that involves multiple departments, agencies, and counties working together. Thus, HHL 8 clarifies those roles for our counties in particular to reserve water credits for DHHL's needs and uses. Second, the bill seeks to add DHHL representation to the county boards of water supply, which is another way to ensure that this prioritization and allocation actually happens. Taking a closer look at the language of HHL 8, this bill seeks to amend several parts of HRS Chapter 54, which is the chapter of our state laws that deal with water systems. In relation to the part of the bill that clarifies the county's roles and requirements, HHL 8 adds a new section to HRS Chapter 54 that provides that DHHL will inform the counties of the number of water credits it requires for its uses, such as homesteading, farming, etc. After learning of DHHL's needs, the county board shall then reserve those amounts of water required by the department. HHL 8 ensures that those reservations will not be allocated to other users unless the department expressly surrenders them first. The proposal also reaffirms that the county should not withhold any water developed by DHHL for the board's own use and allocation. Moreover, it clarifies that DHHL should be given the full amount of water credits justified by a given water development. It is important to know that DHHL is not asking the counties to develop new sources of water, but instead to allocate available water credits to DHHL for the department's homestead uses. And finally, HHL 8 proposes that each board of water supply should develop water shortage policies that require reductions in non-public trust uses of water first, as opposed to equal percentage reductions in use across all water types. As a reminder, Hawaiian Homes is a public trust purpose. Now, in relation to the part of the bill that adds DHHL representation to the county boards of water supply, HHL 8 proposes that at least one of 5 appointed members on the county boards of water supply serve Hawaiian Homes interests. HHL 8 also makes special provisions for the Hawaii County Board of Water Supply by requiring that at least 2 members represent the interests of DHHL. This recommendation was made to reflect the different needs and circumstances of DHHL beneficiaries in West and East Hawaii. So that is the first bill. More information is available in the Bill Digest itself and the sample testimony, which we'll discuss in detail in just a little bit. The second proposal we'll cover is HHL 9, a bill relating to water rights. In Hawaii, water is a public trust resource. This means that fresh water is held in trust by the state for the benefit of the people. The State Water Code, Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 174C, is primarily implemented by the Water Commission, a state agency within the Department of Land and Natural Resources, or DLNR. It embodies this constitutional principle by including provisions for the protection and promotion of in-stream uses, which include traditional and customary Native Hawaiian rights and practices, and by outlining the process for DHHL to reserve water for its homestead use, for example. Although the State Water Commission has primary kuleana for making decisions about who uses how much water and where, the State Board of Land and Natural Resources, a separate agency within DLNR, can permit on a year-to-year basis or lease for a longer term water resources through HRS 17158. This is a different law separate from the Water Code. Historically, that has only been done for water that originates on state lands, although that specific term is not included in the statute itself. The history of HRS 17158 is complex and political. Within the last 5 years or so, the statute has gotten a lot of attention because of East Maui irrigation's, now Mahipono's, use of water from East Maui streams without following the requirements of HRS 17158. More specifically, EMI had never done an environmental impact analysis to consider the effects of its water diversions, despite a court ruling ordering it to do so. Nonetheless, BLNR continued to issue them annual revocable permits for years on end. In 2016, Judge Rhonda Nishimura ruled that the use of revocable permits violated state law, emphasizing the importance of environmental compliance. The court declared all existing revocable permits for water invalid. That same year, however, the legislature approved a fix via House Bill 2501, also known as Act 126, which gave EMI 3 more years to get its environmental impact analysis done, even though they had many years to do so and hadn't started. Act 126 expired in 2019. That year, this permitting issue came to the fore again, but EMI and AMB's efforts failed. AMB attempted to change the law with House Bill 1326 to allow for 10 consecutive one-year holdover permits. The community rallied to oppose the measure, and the bill was not passed. Today, DLNR and revocable permit holders are scrambling to get longer-term water leases. Not a single long-term water lease has been issued since all of this happened. As you can see, the process is intricate and complicated. Although many people focus on Mahipono and similar corporate diverters, there are a range of interests affected. This is an issue for homesteaders and DHHL because 30% of water lease revenue goes to DHHL. In fact, water leases were one of the original sources of funding for DHHL. Due to mismanagement and other issues, again, not a single long-term water lease has been reissued. Older water leases have not been reappraised in decades. To ensure this revenue stream is protected, HHL 9 seeks to cut through the politics of HRS 17158 by setting a minimum selling price for any water leases issued under HRS 17158. In effect, this minimum price ensures that DHHL gets equitable revenue from any waters leased by the state to fund Hawaiian homes. More specifically, this bill operationalizes the intent behind the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act by generating and ensuring revenue for the Native Hawaiian Rehabilitation Fund. There are other benefits as well. The Department of Land and Natural Resources watershed management programs and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs also get monies from these water leases. These revenues are used to improve the educational, economic, political, social, and cultural resources and processes by which the welfare and conditions of Native Hawaiians are improved and perpetuated. For energy companies, alternative sources to water include diesel and fossil fuels. Under the current lease price, companies like Kauai Island Utility Cooperative, also known as KIUC, save about $1.7 million per year, or about 3% of savings from the alternative source, which would be diesel. In other words, KIUC is getting a really good deal on water. To even out the market per se, HHL 9 sets a minimum price for water based on a percentage of the cost of this least expensive alternative source. For our example, let's set the minimum price at 80% of the cost of the alternative source, which again would be diesel. Under HHL 9, the new proposed lease price for water from Wai DHHL would now be $1.4 million per year, as opposed to $52,000. In effect, it would value water at a more competitive price and the same way across various leases, and in doing so, increase revenue for DHHL projects because DHHL gets 30% from all water licenses and leases. Taking a closer look at the language of HHL 9, the bill seeks to amend HRS 171/58 by first clarifying that any disposition of water rights by the state must comply with the provisions of HRS 171/58, including the amendments proposed by HHL 9. For example, if a company wants to bottle water from a stream in Hilo, which would be a type of water disposition, they would have to follow the procedure set forth in HRS 171/58. Next, the bill provides that no water rights may be disposed of for less than a given percent of the cost of the least expensive alternative source of water of similar quality and purpose. As stated before, this amendment essentially sets a minimum selling price for water rights. The bill does not yet specify an exact percentage, which will instead be negotiated on during the legislative session. Finally, an important exception exists. HHL 9 clarifies that this minimum selling price does not apply to leases or licenses issued for in-stream traditional and customary Native Hawaiian practices, such as lo'ikalo cultivation. This exception is important for communities like those in Wai'oli Valley, Kauai. That concludes the second bill. As a reminder, more information is available in the bill digest itself, which can be found in the Google Drive, along with copies of this PowerPoint and other training materials. The last proposal we'll cover is HHL 10, a bill relating to counties. Article 12, Section 2 of Hawaii's Constitution reaffirmed that the spirit of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act shall be faithfully carried out, including the development and maintenance of Hawaiian homes projects throughout the state. DHHL complies with county requirements when developing housing for Native Hawaiians, yet maintenance of the infrastructure is still the responsibility of DHHL. For example, while the county does do weekly residential waste collection within the homestead, it will not address other similar functions, such as the replacement of faded signs or broken streetlights, or clean up and remove illegal dumping. These basic operations are critical to the health and safety of our homestead communities. So, rather than expending their limited resources on infrastructure costs, DHHL could use those funds to develop more housing and, as a result, better fulfill the intent and purpose of the HHCA and Hawaii's Constitution. For example, estimated repair and maintenance cost is around $5.8 million for the 2022 fiscal year and $4.3 million for the 2023 fiscal year. Again, all of these expenses would come out of the monies that DHHL also uses to develop homesteads. In response, HHL 10 would require counties to maintain infrastructure for any DHHL housing development within 60 days of a maintenance request. Infrastructure includes water lines, storm drains, sewer lines, waste disposal, and waste treatment systems, as well as roadway improvements, which include things like pavement, curbing, and sidewalk repair. We are now finished with the bill briefing section of our presentation. More information is available in the bill digests, which can be found in the Google Drive, along with a copy of this PowerPoint, which is titled Highlights from DHHL's 2021 Legislative Package. As a last reminder, since session only started this past Wednesday, the bills do not have official numbers yet. So while they are titled HHL 8, 9, and 10 for our purposes today, these titles will change once they are assigned official bill numbers in the coming weeks. Mahalo nui for tuning in. If you have any questions now, please write them down or throw them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of our presentations. if you have any questions later on, you can feel free to contact me at any time at my email address. I will now turn it over to my colleague Sabrina, who will walk you through submitting written testimony.
Mahalo Nui Hi'ile for helping us really digest the bills and for your awesome presentation. Thank you. Let's all take a moment to give Hi'ile a virtual round of applause. Aloha, and again, my name is Sabrina Maka Gramberg. Now that Hi'ile has really laid a solid foundation for us on the bills, I'd like to take us through the recipe for writing legislative testimony. And then also back to the bill that we are going to be calling for the time being HHL 8, relating to the county boards of water supply. Again, as Ka'ulu and Hi'ile mentioned, the bills will get assigned numbers any day now. So for example, it'll sound something like SB 410 or HB 323. And once that happens, we'll update the materials in our training's Google Drive, and you'll be able to track them as they make their way through the legislative process. We acknowledge today that we have a broad spectrum of experiences with us. So some folks here have extensive knowledge drafting and submitting written testimony. And for others, this is your first exposure to the legislature. With that in mind, I wanted to walk you through the process from the perspective of a first-time testimony writer. This guide is only meant to provide a path as you articulate your mana'o. So please keep in mind that there is no one magic way to write testimony. And again, please take this as just mana'o to get you started and provide you a foundation. So why submit written testimony? Especially now, since the Capitol remains closed to the public during the coronavirus pandemic, written testimony is a way for members of the public to participate in the legislative process. Public hearings give you an opportunity to express your mana'o on an issue in a formal way to the deciding committee or governing body. Additionally, your words, your written testimony is a resource that legislators use in a number of ways. So for example, written testimony really helps legislators understand how a measure or a change in state law may impact an individual or a community. Also keep in mind that written materials are public records available to everyone on the internet, so use discretion on what personal information to include. Once you have the bill and you've read it through a few times, you'll next want to research the issue. So through our training materials, we hope that we can help you folks start on this step. If you look in our Waihona in our Google Drive that we've been mentioning throughout the training, we've prepared some handouts and some sample testimonies to support you in this process. So again, we have copies of the proposed measures by DHHL that Hi'ile just went over. We have bill digests, which provide you context for the proposed changes to state laws. We have sample testimonies to give you a reference on what testimony may look like and may sound like. And again, there are many ways you can draft your testimony. And finally, we have copies of each PowerPoint presentation that you watched today. When you're ready to start writing, you'll want to make sure you locate and include these components in your testimony's heading. So you'll put the name of the committee. You'll want to address the chair and the vice chair of the committee. Next, you'll state your position. So whether you support, oppose, comment, or if you'd like to support the measure but offer some amendments or mana'o that you feel enhance the language or potential outcomes. Next, you'll include the title and number of the bill, the hearing date and time, and then pre-pandemic, we would include the location of the hearing, usually a conference room, but this will likely be different this year. And we'll know more about how they are locating each hearing once the hearing notices start to generate. All these details can be found in the hearing notice for the bill. And so as we await the introduction of and the hearing notices for the measures that Hi'ile walked us through today, I wanted to give everyone an idea of what the hearing notices look like. So I included a screenshot of a hearing notice from 2019. So please take note that these are just examples to help folks get more familiar with what the notices are going to look like. At the top, you have the name of the committee. So this one would be the Committee on Education. You also right below that have the names of the chair and the vice chair of the committee. So for this one, we have Chair Kidani and Vice Chair Mercado Kim. The bill number here is SB 1221. And the hearing was held on Wednesday, February 20th, 2019 at 3. The location of the conference room was 229. So once you've located and included all your details for the headings, you'll then address the committee, kind of similar to a letter. We usually start with aloha. So it'll sound something like aloha Chair Kidani, Vice Chair Mercado Kim, and members of the Committee on Education. Next, you can include an introduction paragraph, and you'll start with a mahalo to the committee for the opportunity to testify. Restate your position, so whether you support, oppose, would like to comment, support with amendments. Introduce yourself, your name, your ohana name, place of residence. And for any of the bills we discussed today or other DHHL bills, you can include your connection to the department. So for example, I'm a beneficiary and lessee of the Hawaiian Homelands Trust, or I am a waitlister. Then you'll really get into the meat or the EO of your testimony in these next paragraphs. So these will be your core paragraphs, and they're going to explain how this bill impacts you, your ohana, and your kaiaulu or your community. You're going to explain why this bill is important to you. So for example, with Measure HHL 8, in our sample testimony, we discussed the importance of housing security. We touched on Prince Kuhio's vision for his people and really honoring that vision. And then we discussed the importance of carrying out the provisions of the HHCA, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, the state constitution, state laws, and county ordinances. And then in the next core part, or the EO of your testimony, you'll want to offer some positive suggestions or alternative strategies to resolve the issue. So for example, again, in regard to Measure HHL 8, in our sample testimony, we explained that providing water to homestead communities will get folks off the wait list and into homes. And then we also explained that this measure seeks to really harmonize the intergovernment process for building Hawaiian homes projects. In other words, this measure will help all different government entities, Lau Lima, put their many hands together to get the job done. Finally, you'll wrap up, you'll close your testimony, and then you can thank the committee for hearing your concerns. For example, mahalo nui for your time and consideration. Make a request, ask them to support your position. For example, my ohana and I urge the committee to pass this bill, which will provide water for our homestead communities so that more people can get off the wait list and into homes. So I wanted to end my presentation with this mana'o from Representative Martin on writing testimony. She shared with us, use your own words. So form letters are not as valued. So even if you think someone wrote a fabulous, great sample testimony, using your own words is best. She said, speak about your personal situation. If something affects you directly and you can speak about your personal situation, then it is most persuasive. Know which districts the committee members are from. Legislators care about their own constituents most. So if you are in someone's district, say so or include this information in your address. Be mindful that time is limited. So a shorter testimony is likely to get read all the way through. Be olu olu, keep the language civil. And then finally, use your leo, use your voice, meaning that even if the legislator is already on your side, it still helps them, our elected officials, to be able to say that constituents are concerned, and then to be able to share stories with colleagues or administrators in trying to get things done. So mahalo, and with that, I would like to begin and start our question and answer portion of our training. But before we get into that, I'd like to turn the time over to our director, Kapua Sproat. We'd like to take some time to acknowledge some of the elected officials who are joining us today. Kapua.
Mahalo, Sabrina. Aloha mai, and mahalo again for joining us during your lunch hour. We recognize how very valuable your time is and are truly honored by your presence. As I look out across my Zoom screen, I see a range of OGs, water warriors, kia'i, people who taught me everything I know about water law and who have really gotten us to where we are today. I see former candidates for public office and also a range of elected, appointed officials, including Kipukai Kuali'i from our Kauai County Council, Johanna Amarin, Barino Briga, and Norman Franco from the Maui Board of Water Supply. Ho, Maui Nui represent, and Kaleo Manuel from the Water Commission. And so mahalo for joining us and welcome. And in particular, I really want to recognize and mahalo Kaleo Manuel. These Imane Kawai Water Law and Advocacy trainings are actually his brainchild. So we all have him to thank for this opportunity to spend this time together this afternoon. So please join me in giving Kaleo a round of applause and a mahalo from the heart. And so given the wealth of experience in the room, I'd just like to see if any of our elected or appointed officials have mana'o to share, tips for our participants on how best to be an effective advocate. Perhaps I'll start with Kaleo just because I called him out and see him on the Zoom screen, but just in opportunity, really, given your time, seeing many, many people appear before you and testify, any words of wisdom for our participants this afternoon.
Mahalo Kapua, Huli staff and those presenters. It's always good to see a building of this community of practice. So I think the best suggestion is just stay informed and participate in all processes that you can. And bring your mana'o and your genuine self to those spaces, because as decision makers or staff that support decision makers, they may not have the experiences that you have, and those unique experiences and perspectives are valuable. And if they're not presented, then there's assumptions that they don't exist, or there's no actual issue at hand. Whether, even if you support something, come out and say you support it, because way too often there isn't. There's usually, when you see testimony or participation, is when people oppose something. And just as a suggestion, it's always great to oppose, provide a solution. So I think that's great. My internet is showing unstable, so I'm gonna turn off my video and hand it off. Thank you for the opportunity, Kapua. Mahalo.
Oh, mahalo Kaleo. I'd just like to see if anyone else, perhaps our council member, Kipukai Kuali'i, do you have any mana'o to share?
I'll just say an aloha and mahalo to everyone who put this on today. I learned a lot myself. I'll just say, I think Representative Martin pretty much covered it pretty well. When you're doing your testimony, do try to keep it brief and make it personal, tell your story and tell why it's important to you. And I know as an elected official reading testimony and often trying to multitask when I'm looking at it, it's easier for us if you keep it brief and get right to it. So, mahalo again.
Mahalo, Councilmember Kuali'i. Anyone else? And actually with this, maybe perhaps I'll turn it back to Sabrina to see if we'd like to transition to our Q&A, unless anyone else, any of our other officials. Oh, and I also recognize, I see Representative Ganadin has joined us. Mahalo, Sunny, for being here with us.
I know you just jumped in, but would you like to share your view on engaging and advocating in the process this year, or any kind of tips you have for navigating the new COVID procedures?
Aloha, everyone.
Wow.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me join you. I apologize, we're kind of under some deadlines here at the legislature. One of the first bill cutoffs is today. So as a freshman legislator, I've got a short amount of time to draft legislation, get it signed by my colleagues, submit it downstairs, and do the like. We've also have basically blown up the ordinary course of gathering signatures. So usually this place is a hive of activity where you've got sometimes thousands of people here at the Capitol darting in and out of offices, getting signatures, meetings being had in the hallway. It's really a ghost town right now as a result of the pandemic, as well as the unfortunate and racist events of the last few weeks at the US Capitol. So the House and Senate Sergeant of Arms have actually put up barricades. So you might have seen that in the news. Are you folks hearing me? I can't, like, okay, cool. So yeah, there's barricades. It feels real lonely in here. And so many of us at the House were concerned about access to the democratic process moving forward. So as of right now, although there are many issues with Zoom about privacy, recording, that kind of a thing, hearings are going to be had via Zoom and a link. Of course, that is going to limit access to those who don't have full broadband, to those who live in rural communities, and people in my own community at Kuhio Park Terrace, which is the 216-story towers in Kalihi. Internet only really goes up to the 3rd floor. The state never got around to changing the old copper wiring to the kind of thing that we would need to actually stream anything. So there's some real concerns. There's some talk about using the public library system to allow people to get access and all that. We're not sure how it's going to work. Let's see. I'm going to back it up a little bit because I jumped in a little bit late. My name is Sonny Ganadin. I am the State House representative for District 30, which includes Lower Kalihi, Halawa, Sand Island, and the airport. I am a proud graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law, 2006. After that, I did a clerkship for the Honorable Richard T. Bisson on Maui, who is now the Chief Judge. He's a proud Hawaiian man who lives on Hawaiian homesteads. I later went on to work as a bartender and as a writer for local magazines. And I was working at the Domestic Violence Action Center for a few years. And then after that, I got to be the lead writer for what's called the Native Hawaiian Justice Task Force Report, which discusses the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in criminal justice here in the state of Hawaii, which is actually an international thing. It's horrible. And it's something that—
Sonny, thank you.
Yeah. So
no, I was just gonna thank.
Yeah.
I just was gonna thank you so much for joining us and for being here. You had perfect timing actually, because we were just in the portion of our Q&A when we were introducing our elected and appointed officials and going to questions from our participants. And so I wanted to, if it's okay, make sure that we can transition. I see in the chat, Uncle Glenn Tavis has made some awesome comments, and I really wanted to make sure that for the participants who have been here, if you folks have any questions, if there are ways that we can better support your advocacy given the challenges that Sonny has mentioned, we definitely want to do that. So any questions from folks, either in the chat or you can also, it's a small enough group, folks can feel free to
One quick thing. The announcements are going to be on the legislative website so far. Everything is via Zoom. Don't show up to the Capitol. It's going to be really easy to testify. A lot of us are concerned about access moving forward, okay? So for all the important work that you do, the state is facing $1.4 billion deficit, probably another $1 billion in unemployment insurance. We're hoping for a federal bailout. That said, everything is on the line. So everything that you hold dear can be cut. So please testify and please stay updated to the best of your ability. I'm going to try and do that with social media.
Mahalo. And Kapua, before the last thing, before we go to Q&A, I just want to acknowledge for everybody who's coming into the call and they're like, wow, we have a lot of Board of Water Supply folks from Maui. The Maui County Board of Water Supply specifically reached out to DHHL, said, can you do a presentation? Can you talk to us about the relationship between your mission and your duties in our kuleana? They're the only board that's done that for DHHL. And I just really want to aloha them and mahalo them for that leadership that they've shown across the archipelago. It's been so satisfying and gratifying. We've really, really appreciated it. But with that, I will hand it back to Sabrina to facilitate Q&A.
Okay, awesome. Mahalo. Again, if anybody has questions, this is really, like Kapua said, it's a small group. So if you'd like to raise your hand or unmute yourself, you can go ahead and direct your question or vocalize it. You can also drop it in the chat and I'll monitor for that as well. I noticed that we do have Representative Martin herself joining us today. And so I'd like to maybe hand the mic over to her if she would like to share with us maybe some mana'o about maybe how legislators use testimony in their decision making, or how do we use data and statistics in our testimony, and should we even include them, and so forth. So Senator Martin, aloha and welcome. Mahalo.
Hi, I don't know if it would be useful, but I do have a few slides that just have information. I missed what went before, so I don't know how much you have already talked about what the process will be like this year. That's a little different than other years. Have you already covered that?
Not in much detail. Kapua, I noticed that you might have mana'o.
Oh, sure. And we did, thank you so much for joining us, Representative Martin. We did have two presentations. One, Ka'ulu started with generally how the session is going to be different this particular year, with a focus on the website, how people can engage, how folks are using Zoom, how people can sign up for notices closed. And so the importance of really engaging electronically to the degree that we can. But if you, Rep. Ganaden had fabulous additional insight to add. And if you also have any additional mana'o, either tips for our participants or just what you've seen so far, we would absolutely welcome them.
Okay. I just want to say that on the High House Dems Instagram or Facebook, there are some really user-friendly slides on how to go through the process. So people here in this meeting could share that easily with their community, and it has all the links and stuff like that, because it, the truth is some people haven't testified before, so it's not even about the new system, it's just how to do it. And then for people that are familiar with the old ways, that might be useful. So I'll put it in the chat. But I am brand new, so my experience is mostly as someone who is providing testimony, which I've been doing for a very, very long time, both at the City Council and in the state legislature. And what I've found, and I've had feedback, and I have worked closely with legislators on bills in the past, is that a form letter, while it's very easy, or a petition and a form letter are much less impactful. You can easily see the repeated same phrases, in testimony, and it means a lot less than if somebody has written something themselves. And if they write something themselves, it means the most when it impacts them directly. So to say that I'm worried about something happening far away is much less impactful than someone saying this, this is something that this legislation will either benefit me directly or it will hurt me directly, in some way. So another thing that's good is if the person testifying, if you're sending that testimony to somebody who is your representative, now I can speak as a representative, we care about everybody, but we care even more about our constituents. So if you have that going, it doesn't mean that others won't read it, or won't listen if it's something that's important to them. But if you are a constituent, let them know, because then even if it wasn't an issue that was important to them, they will perk up, because everybody cares. You know, you feel responsible for representing your own constituents. I guess the other thing is that it matters, right? Bills that go through with a bunch of testimony definitely carry more weight than bills that do not have testimony. So for example, I was involved in the 100% renewable power effort years ago. We would have hundreds of pieces of testimony for every hearing. It was a lot of work to get that testimony. You have to do it all over again for the next hearing. And it made it really hard for legislators to ignore the issue. So I think that's it. And maybe everybody already knew that, but I'm excited to read your testimony when it comes.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for your participation today. Again, if nobody has any questions, I'd actually like to turn the time over to Wayne Tanaka, who is the manager at the Public Policy Department over at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. He had some mana'o that he wanted to share with us today. So Wayne, take it away.
Thank you, Sabrina. Wayne Tanaka, Public Policy Manager here at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. First I just wanted to say, mahalo nui to the organizers, to the presenters, and the attendees for today's workshop. Like I said last night, in these weeks of meeting with legislators in the lead up to session, and then through my work at the Capitol over these years, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for constituents and for Native Hawaiians to get engaged in the making of laws that will impact our society and our way of life here in Hawaii, for better or worse. Folks like Lehua and I, our teams do everything we can to, we review all the bills that are introduced. We try our best to stop the bad bills from going forward, try to get good ideas moving, getting them passed. But we can't do it all, and we definitely can't do some things like show legislators that their constituents care, that their constituents are watching. And so without more community engagement, it's really easy for these decision makers to kind of overlook what we are saying, and then listen to folks like lobbyists who they consider to be experts, but who don't actually have for the most part much of a background in Native Hawaiian issues, and largely are not paid to try to protect and further the interests and rights of Native Hawaiians. So that's why I'm so grateful and inspired to see this kind of workshop, and see so many participants taking the time to learn about how to engage with the legislative process, and also learn about DHHL's priorities, which are pretty important. I did want to share that OHA also has a small package of legislative priorities that we are trying to get past this session. We also have a sign up list. So if you want to sign up for action alerts on our priorities, and on other really important high profile bills, you can do so at our website. It's at www.oha.org/legislation. And I'll put that in the chat after Empal. Okay, thank you, Kapua. But yeah, there'll be there's information on our bills there, some white papers that provide more information, and also too, if you have questions beyond that, you can always email me at waynet@oha.org, and I'll put that in the chat as well. But again, thank you so much to everyone who's put this workshop together, who's here today. Really inspired, and really thankful for all of you and all that you do. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Wayne. Okay, I'm going to actually maybe address this to, okay, Sunny or Wayne or somebody who can jump in and help us out here. But we do have one question. Will any Wai water issues with agriculture land users be addressed in this legislation, maybe in this legislative session, if anybody has information on that?
Briefly, sorry for jumping in so quickly into this. It's like I can't tell if I'm mansplaining right into a Zoom sometimes, and it's just a wild world. So I apologize if I just didn't if I'm just running right into this thing. I'm also new here, Representative Martin. I'm on 4 committees. I'm vice chair of corrections and military veterans affairs. I'm on the 2 education committees, and I'm on water and land. That is now chaired by Representative Tarnas out of Hawaii Island. Had a really good conversation with him. TMT is coming back this year. So there's gonna be a lot of issues around land management. Chair Tarnas is interested in some version of almost like an alternative dispute resolution. We'll see how that goes. And then we might be looking for a legislative vehicle to allow more testimony for the public, and from the perspective of Native Hawaiian advocates, I understand this is a hard line, but this is also a way to slow down that process. Of course, there have been issues around water rights. All that stuff is going to be coming through with the major cuts to the budget. What progressive members are worried about is major landowners, developers, and advocates for specific industries coming into the legislature and saying the only way we can get the economy running again is to deregulate. So there's going to be probably a bunch of sneaky bills that are going to be running through. So watch out for that. There's going to be a lot of blocking, I think. So with this big of a budget cut, you're going to have middle of the road and right-leaning members that are willing to do full deregulation of land and water management. Keep on the lookout.
Okay, mahalo, Sunny. And then with that, we have about 7 more minutes. And if Koulu has prepared maybe some walkthrough tips for folks that, want to learn and really get more familiar with the legislative website, I'd like to maybe pass the remainder of our time to her so that she can walk us through the website and its features. Thank you so much, Koulu.
Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to start by, this is the homepage. So you'll have that in Handout 1 in the Google Drive. And I think the most important thing is to learn how to register. So I'll try and go slowly, but let me know if my mouse is moving too quickly for you, or if there's any other area you would like me to point out. So the first thing to do is register here, and you're going to click this upper right hand corner, and then what will appear are different fields for you to input your information, and from there you'll click the create user, and then you should get an email confirmation, and you'll have all your login information ready to go. And then you'll go to this next button here, I guess icon. It's a sign in. So I'm already have my thing saved, and you'll input your sign in information, and then we'll log in here. And so a few of the features that I mentioned in the presentation are located right down at the bottom when you scroll. So here you have measure tracking, where you can add measures for you to look at and keep track of. And then you have hearing notifications here. I'll click here just to show you an example of how you'd sign up. And this is, again, so you can get a notification every time a committee is going to hear a particular bill, or for a committee in general, you can get hearing notifications. So if I wanted to get, I looked up SB1, which is a bill relating to Hawaiian homes with an S, I believe, pertaining to the commission. So you'll see it's related to housing. So if I wanted to track that bill, just as an example, I'd input it here. So SB1, and then click add, and then it'll add it. And then you'll get a notification to your email. And if you wanted to subscribe to a particular committee, so for example, I'm interested in getting all notifications for the Hawaiian Affairs Committee, which is located here in alphabetical order, Hawaiian Affairs. I'll click that committee, and then I will get a notification on it when I click save and exit. So every time that committee hears a bill, you'll get an email. And if you sign up for a bunch of different committees, you'll get tons of emails. So I would recommend just being selective. And another another really important feature for this year is the testimony. So I'll click here on this testimony icon, and you'll see it has submit testimony. You'll click, or you'll look up the particular bill for that you want to testify on after you get a notification, or if you sign up for the OHA alerts, then they'll send you bills that will be accepting testimony. But right now it's not, because there are no committee hearings scheduled yet, I can't show you an example, but this is where you go to submit your testimony, and there are instructions on how to do that. You'll see on the bottom, the Senate and the House have already updated their procedures really briefly. And then I guess if you have Instagram, you can go to, what the representative spoke about on slides to access all of this information. And then I get the last feature I want to show you folks is how to, or second to last, I guess. This one is looking at finding your legislators' information. So you click this icon at the bottom and you'll see all of our legislators for this year are on this page. And if I'm looking for, say, a senator, I can click here. It'll show me senators. Or if I want to look particularly for representatives, you can click here. So I will search right here. My senator, Senator Kalani English, you'll see his information is here really quickly, and the district, the area he represents. So Upcountry Maui is where I live. And then if I click his name here, it'll take me to his webpage, and you'll also be able to read about you have a bio here for him, and then other detailed information besides his contact, so his phone number and email. You have his experience, other newsletters he puts out of his office, a bunch of different information. You even have measures he's introduced in the past. You'll have that information here, and what committees he sits on. So this year he sits on the Ways and Means Committee, Public Safety, Intergovernmental Affairs, and Military Affairs, Transportation. So really great way to find out more about your representatives. And then the last feature I want to show you folks is the one I talked about, the reports and lists to search for bills. So here you'll click on that icon, and then you can see here there's a drop down menu, and you can search for different years. I talked to you folks about the 2020 example where you use Hawaiian homes, but I'll look at the 2021 example and do a real quick search. I know our time is running. So if I scroll all the way to the bottom, you have subject search, and then again the drop box comes. You can see I already have put Hawaiian homes and Hawaiian home in, but I want to just show you folks what it looks like when I do Hawaiian homes with an S, and I press go, and then what comes up? Nothing yet. So I'll go back, and then I will search again and do Hawaiian home, delete the S, go, and then you have 4 measures that come up. And from there, once you find something that you're interested in, you read the description, say, oh, this sounds like something I want to keep up on. And so you would click it, and here you have SB1, the example I used earlier. You can click the bill, and it'll take you directly to the page that has the report title, the description. It'll say who introduced the bill here, for example, and maybe you even want to look at whether they are your representatives, because then you can submit testimony and say, I'm a constituent, you introduced this bill, we have some relation, this means something to me. And you see the status of the bill here. It's a summary, and you can sort by date. And then you also have on the right hand side here, once the session starts to progress, there will be more updates on different versions of the bill as it progresses. You have committee reports, and it'll also have testimony. So once committee hearings start happening, then you can also read the testimony of others who have submitted, and then you can also get hearing notices. So again, it's such a great tool. The handout 1 has a guide for you all, and I hope this helped you understand the basic features that are really important for you to access the information this session. So I will stop sharing now.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Kaulu. I think those little details really make a big difference. So mahalo for sharing that with us. So we are up at time right now. I just wanted to really mahalo everyone for your participation today. Mahalo to our presenters for all their hard work, gathering materials, researching the bills. Mahalo to our Kahuliao team who are operating behind the scenes and ensuring you are all able to get the most out of your time today. We wish you all a wonderful Aloha Friday and productive legislative session. Stay safe and aloha. Mahalo nui.
Everyone, and if folks have additional questions, I know we had a lot of folks. We're happy to stick around at the end and continue to answer questions, but we do want to be respectful of people's time. So if people have more questions, feel free to hang out. If not, thank you again for joining us.